Welcome to the Influence Experiment, where we seek to explore the art and the science of building influential capacity. Every month, we want to raise thought-provoking ideas of how you can be an investor of the influence you carry. If you're ready to journey with us, then it's time to experiment.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Influence Experiment as we continue to learn how to invest our influence well. Today we are talking about a very fun and riveting topic of managing disappointment and disappointing others. When many of us think of the idea of disappointing others, if we're being honest, a little piece of us dies inside immediately. While others might think, man, I don't care if I disappoint people at all. Regardless, the art of skillfully receiving disappointment and disappointing others is one of the many things that some of us can struggle to obtain. Since this is a reality of life, is there a tactful way to receive and give disappointment? Is there a way to reject anxiety and apathy in this conversation? How can I manage disappointment well in my own life? Well, you will not be disappointed today because I have invited Meredith Dahl to join us to provide all the answers that we need. So, Meredith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be talking about this with you.
I'm so stoked to be able to dialogue with you as well. And hey, before we kind of dive in, would you be willing just to share a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're about?
Sure, yes. My name is Meredith Dahl. I am a wife to John for 14 years, and I'm a mom to two amazing boys, my son Liam, who is 9, and my son Landon, who is 6. Liam has autism and is a nonverbal kiddo, so that has its own journey on its own, but I love my boys and love being able to learn as a parent. And that's kind of my hobby, is being a mom and a wife, spending time with my family, doing things together. And I also work at CrossNet Ministries in New Holland, Pennsylvania.
Love it. And how many years have you been at CrossNet?
Almost 14 years.
Come on.
As well. Yes.
That's awesome. Well, sweet. Thanks for sharing just a little bit about yourself. And even as we discuss the topic of disappointing others and receiving disappointment, it doesn't take long to realize that whether it's being a mom or whether it's working in a job or being a wife or whatever, that it comes pretty quickly, right? The need to be able to understand this concept well, and to be honest, that many people don't handle it well, right? And so I'm really excited for you to be willing to kind of venture into the depth of this conversation. And so, but as we dialogue here, here's a question, here's a thought for you to kind of kick us off here. You know, when we're kids, the smallest thing in the world can seem like the biggest, most catastrophic thing. I don't know if you've been there or done that, but like as a young girl, is there something that comes to mind that you perceived as astronomical disappointment, but in reality, it really wasn't that big of a deal?
Yeah, I think about all sorts of times when there's things that I wanted to get as a little kid but didn't get. And one of those times that I think about that when I look back in my elementary age years, I thought was the biggest deal. But looking back, I'm glad that I was disappointed at the time. Was I used to play softball when I was in elementary school, and I got kind of bored of softball. So I decided I was going to join the guys' team and play Little League. So I was the only girl on the team. And all the moms would cheer and be all excited. So I wanted to make these moms super proud. And I was going to be the best Little League player with all the boys. And I thought that I was going to get a home run one of these times up at bat. Okay. And every week I got struck out. And I would love to say this huge exciting moment that I got this home run.
Right,
but
naturally.
I did not. I did not get it. And I was so devastated because I wanted to prove, we can do it, moms. We're all in this together. But I didn't get it. And I was super disappointed. But looking back, I'm so glad I didn't, because I would have thought I was, so incredible back then at that time. Right? So that was one of the disappointing things in life.
It was a way of God keeping you humble,
yes.
right? Yes. And as a baseball lover, I can comically even relate to some of that, because I was never a power hitter, ever. And so I was like, I'm gonna hit a home run this season. Nope. I'm gonna hit a home run this season. Nope. And just into this day, actually never. I had an inside the park home run a couple of times, but I actually never to this day hit a home run because I just was never a power hitter. So it was a way of God keeping me humble as well. So
I'm glad I did not get that
funny.
home run.
That's funny. Well, hey, kind of, this is maybe a no-duh statement, but like, again, typically in general, we think about us as human beings, we're not really good at managing disappointment. Like, some of us could claim it, and some of us maybe really are, but like, we're not really good at it in general. Why is that? Like, why is it that when disappointment comes our way, we're not really the best at managing it? Like, I didn't get the promotion. My game is canceled due to rain. I didn't hit a home run. I didn't get invited to that party or whatever it is. Why are we not good at it usually?
I think we're not wired to be good at receiving disappointment. I think that's just how we're created as human beings. But I think when we have moments of disappointment, whether you didn't get the promotion or that you didn't get to play in the game, you didn't get the home run, it opens up pieces that we have to become vulnerable to, because it opens up whether or not we've made a mistake, or whether we're not good enough, or whether we're not meeting the expectations that we have on ourselves. We're also all of a sudden opened up to, I have to be vulnerable. I have to realize that I am human. I have to realize that I have feelings. I have to realize that I'm experiencing something that I don't like, but it's a part of who we are, and it's part of life, because we will be disappointed at some point in life.
Yeah. You said a word there. You're starting us off strong here, Meredith. We use the word vulnerable. A lot of us run away from the word vulnerable, right? And it's not easy. Like, it's a practice that most of us are, if we're being honest, to be vulnerable is to show weakness, or we're tempted to think that, at least, right? And when we step into disappointment, it leaves us in a vulnerable state. And so, that's really, really good. Thanks for speaking into that, for sure. And so, let's think about optimism for a second. I'm an optimistic at heart. My wife is not. She is a realist, and I need my my realist wife to help. As I sometimes comically say, pulling. I'm the high flying balloon as an optimist, and she's like the rope tethering me down the string, tethering me down there so I don't fly away in unrealism. How does optimism, pessimism, realism, how does that play into the conversation of managing disappointment?
That's a great question. I think, like you said, we all kind of tend to err on one side. We're natural or eternal optimists, or sometimes we see things more pessimistically. But it's important for both sides to look at a situation with realistic expectations. So as I am also more of an optimist, sometimes I have to look at what are the realistic expectations for my life, for my family, for my kids, for my career. What are those realistic expectations? Expectations are important. And then we look at someone who's more of a pessimist, who looks at everything negatively, and maybe a lot of bad things have happened in life. And so it's just almost this expectation that more bad is going to come.
Sure.
What is real? What is truth in this situation when I'm looking at it? What is positive? What are some strengths that can come out of being disappointed, having hard things come? There's truth, there's positive things that come out of it. If we look at from a Christian worldview, I believe that you feel this way, that God uses our challenges, our difficult times, the pain that we feel, and he uses those to grow us. And as a pessimist, sometimes you have to look at, what are the growth opportunities here? Where do I see God working? And also for the optimist, where do my expectations need to lie? Where can this actually go? We use a strength-based approach with kids that we work with at CrossNet when we're working on goals. And a kid might say, well, I'm going to play for the NBA one day. That is my goal.
Right.
And maybe they are good enough to play for the NBA, but we talk about these realistic steps. If you really want to play for the NBA one day, what are those steps that's going to take for you to get there? So it might be this amazing goal, but let's talk through this a little bit. And so I think that's what's so important about that realism piece, is expectations and kind of understanding of what is real, what is truth, what are things that are manageable.
Well, I think you're spot on to say that within optimism sometimes we can miss the what are the realistic expectations, or realistically what's going to happen, and to kind of think through whether it's troubleshooting, whether it's putting down goals. Like, sometimes in optimism you can just be like, it's gonna be all fine and dandy, and it's all gonna work out in the end. But it doesn't always, and probably many times it doesn't work out the way. And so, as an optimist, as a proclaimed optimist yourself, I know that's something that I've had to wrestle with, and so. Yeah, it's definitely a needed piece to realize, even as a level of self-awareness of like how do you think in relation to optimism, pessimism, realism? As you're listening to this, maybe that's something for you to kind of think through. Of like, hey, like, do I typically think in the optimistic lens, the pessimistic lens, the realistic lens? Because that could play right into how do you manage disappointments well. And so, but as we think about even like the word like anxiety, or being nervous, like that, those types of emotions can come over us quite easily when we think about disappointing others, whether it is your spouse, whether it is a boss, whether it is an employee, whether it is a teammate. Why can we be so anxiety filled when we think about the idea of like, I'm about to go disappoint somebody else? Why does that happen?
I think there's probably a few different things that come to play here. There could be just your past, how you've grown up in relationship to your parents and how they raised you, or grandparents, whoever your caregiver was, because their expectations on you and how you grow can really impact how you're going to move into relationships in the future. So that plays a piece into it. And then also how you're wired. Some people are more adapt to be able to handle going forward to conflict and tough situations, and then some people it causes more anxiety and stress. So I think all those things play in. I think in general, as individuals and humans, no one wants to disappoint anybody. I don't think I'd be shocked if someone said, I love it. I love failing people. I love disappointing people. Right. It's my favorite. That's not how we're wired.
Sure.
But there are, some personalities are going to have more stress and anxiety with it. And also how we've grown up and different experiences that we've had are going to play into it. And as a child, as a teenager, or just even different work environments. So our level of anxiety is going to be different by those different experiences.
And I think that's even a profound insight to say, like, how we're wired today and how we respond to people today is a direct result of what happened in our childhood or our teenage years, or some of the critical moments, positive or negative, that have shaped us into who we are today. And so maybe again, here's another food for thought as you're listening of like, man, if you're someone who gets just this like crazy anxiety over how you when you think about the idea of disappointing someone or making someone upset or whatever, maybe it's attached to something from your past, or maybe it's attached to something that that has happened that you kind of need to think through. That's some even to the point of trauma that you've kind of buried and not really dealt with, and like, why is this such a hang up for me? Why is this so difficult? Maybe there's something in your past that has a hindrance to you. And so knowing that it affects us, right? Like, it affects us more than we would care to admit. Our past does, and who we are today. And so, and not saying that you should never have anxiety. Like I said, no one likes to disappoint people, but if there's like crippling anxiety, it could be something that could be attached to someone's to your past, something that's happened. And so, if a result of not wanting to disappoint someone can come from the desire to please them, which that's a flag for me, being a people pleaser, what are some of the dangers of always trying to please people? What would you say to that?
I think probably everyone would agree that there are some dangers when it comes to just constantly people pleasing, and if you're wired that way, that's something you have to think through. When you're thinking about disappointing people and the anxiety that you might be feeling, it's really good to think about what's the motivation behind this? Is it because I want them to look at me as someone who's responsible? Is it because I care so deeply about them? Is it because I have a fear of failing? Think about the motivation behind it. If your motivation is, I just don't want to fail people, I just want them to be happy with me, I just want them to like me, that is something that will eventually cause such extreme anxiety and such burnout, because I think we all agree we will never please everybody, every time, every decision. And there's two sides of that. One, we are not perfect people. We're not perfect leaders. So we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail people. We're going to look back and think, I should have done that differently. Yep. And so we're going to disappoint people because we're not perfect, and we're learning and we're growing as leaders. And then we're also going to disappoint people because they might have expectations put on us that are unfair, that we're never going to reach, that they have stuff maybe in their own lives that has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
So if we're constantly trying to make people like us want to please them, it's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to exhaustion because we're never going to be able to please every person every time and all the people in our lives. It's impossible.
No, you said an interesting thought of like when maybe people are imposing like unrealistic expectations or and like what do you do with something like that? Like if someone is imposing unrealistic expectations on you to the point where you're like, man, like I know, like I gotta disappoint them. Like I don't know how do you think you would respond to that if someone was imposing unrealistic expectations or just too much of a burden? Like how would you respond to that specifically?
Oh, that's a great question. That probably happens a lot in a working environment. It could happen with a spouse as well. So I would, in a situation like that where I feel like someone's putting on expectations on me that are unrealistic, that I know I will never reach, I think an honest conversation is always going to go the longest and the farthest. So talking through the situation, being clear with expectations that I have on that situation, and then also just listening clearly to that person's perspective. I think a lot of times it comes down to perspectives anyway, how they view a situation, spouse, child, employee, peer in a work environment, and how I do. So talking about it, listening with a curiosity, please explain like what you think that I should do, what you think I should have done. Can we come to an understanding? And then are you willing to hear my view on the situation? Because you might be seeing just a sliver of this situation where I'm looking at it much broader. And can you kind of hear where I'm coming from? So I think it comes down to having those honest conversations on expectations for that individual and also on myself and just being clear.
That's really good. Thank you so much for speaking. That was even like a 1, 2, 3, 4 like bullet list there that someone should hit the pause button and write those down because those are really good. Thanks for speaking into that. There's a quote that it wrecked me the first time I heard this. It was from a professor at Lancaster Bible College, and I was like, no, absolutely not. And then like over time, I was like, I see what he's talking about. 110%, and to the point where I'm like, I love this quote. It's almost like I like champion this thing. And so the quote is this: in life and leadership, you have to know when to disappoint people and how to do it well. Interact with that for a second. What do you think about it? What does it mean? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's an awesome quote. I definitely agree with it. About 10 years ago, I put a little placard in my office, and it's still there, and it says, "You will disappoint someone today."
Wow.
And that sounds really depressing
Well,
and not like a real inspirational quote. There's not, something up on a wall with like kittens with some inspirational quote on it. But it's a reminder to me that I'm going to disappoint someone today. As a leader, like I shared before, we're going to make mistakes. But also, we can't be everything to all people.
Come on.
So I'm going to disappoint people. So I have the opportunity to do it poorly or do it well. And so that is so good in that quote, is that we can disappoint people well. And so there's two sides of it, like we talked about a little bit before. There's the side of, as a leader, I have to keep growing. I have to keep seeing, how did I contribute to this disappointing situation? Maybe I've done something wrong and I can grow from it and learn from it and do better. And then there's the other side of, how do I make sure that I am doing this well? And kind of going back to what we talked about, listening clearly, listening to someone, being curious about their point of view and really hearing them, and then doing the communicating side. I think in most situations, people understand our decisions and where we're coming from if they understand the why.
Yeah.
So if they understand why I've made that decision, why I've said no, why I didn't do what they thought I would do, it kind of helps us all come back to the table and understand each other a little bit more. So I can help someone kind of walk through that disappointment of, maybe I said, no, we're not going to do this because of X, Y, Z. I can do that well by saying, this is the why. I hear you. Your feelings and opinions are completely valid, and I hear where you're coming from, and that is frustrating to me too. We can't go that way because of XYZ.
Yeah.
So hearing people validating their frustrations towards me or towards a situation is important. And then being really open and honest about where we're going from here, I think helps. It doesn't fix it all. It doesn't solve the situation, but it does it better.
Well, and I would even say that, like, many times people just want to feel heard, right? So I think that you just said something crucial, which was in the when you disappoint people, that to validate them, right? To acknowledge their desires, acknowledge that they're human, acknowledge their emotions, and to validate them. And so when people feel heard, maybe they might not be like, oh, like I'm 100% on board with whatever this new plan is, or this idea, or this disappointment, or whatever. But like it helps soften the blow and it helps them maybe be a little bit more understanding. And so I think that's a really good thing to emphasize within this conversation, is to allow people to feel heard. And so thanks for saying that. Another, you said that it's a plaque, right, that says you will disappoint someone today.
Yes.
I think someone needs to hear that today. That sorry, not sorry. As being flawed human beings, we will disappoint someone today, but to take it with grace. To live in grace and learn also how to continuously improve who we are as we move forward. So we can do this well. And so, no, that was rich. Thank you for speaking into that. As we think about leadership in general, how does a leader's inability to receive disappointment or disappoint others show a lack of maturity or development? What would you? That's a kind of a straight to the point question. But like, what do you think about that? How does it show a lack of immaturity or lack of maturity and development?
That's a great question, and I think it's something we should all ask ourselves as leaders. Like, how do we handle discipline? We all report to somebody. We all have people in our lives, and so how do we receive that? How do we process it? What do we feel? It's a good place to kind of start our self-evaluation.
Sure, of course.
And to kind of see where we're at in our development with people that we're working with or the people that report to us. If someone's not able to receive disappointment or not able to receive a no or not able to receive any sort of critical feedback at all, we would probably all agree that's a really challenging person to work with.
Yep.
Because it seems like it's always one-sided. And it's so important in a work environment that we believe the best in each other. If I'm working with you, Tony, that I believe the best from you, that I know that you're coming with your all, you are not trying to go out there and harm people or make mistakes. That's not your intention.
Sure.
So if you've hurt me or I'm frustrated with you, if I can come to you and talk to you about it, we can move forward. So if someone's not willing to do that, then you're really in a really challenging situation, and that's really does show a lack of growth and maturity and not a team player.
Yeah.
No one wants to be on a team with someone that you can't have crucial conversations with.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I think most of us would say I don't want to be a poor team player, but when and though we can say that in the moments when we are receiving disappointment or we're giving it to someone and someone who just doesn't receive it well, it's really easy for our emotions to take over, right? Like even the best of us, like our emotions can take over, and our impulsive, selfish nature can kind of kick in a little bit, and so it's just as you said, reflecting inward and saying, making sure, like, hey, am I a person who receives it well in general, and kind of challenge yourself towards that. It's a really good practice. It's easier said than done, right? But it's so necessary as we think about that, and so even as we think about the influence experiment, right? The whole concept of this podcast is finding the art in the science to building influential capacity, and there is definitely a needed art to managing disappointment, right? And so, what would you say, if you can speak into this? What would you say is some of the science behind it, the objective truth behind managing disappointment and disappointing others, but then also maybe some of the art, the subjective, individual, personal expression behind managing disappointment and disappointing others?
That's a unique question and a great question. I think science or truth behind it is some stuff we've already said, but we will disappoint people, and disappointment is not meant to destroy us.
Oof.
We are not created or wired to have disappointment to destroy us. It is meant to help us to grow. God uses all these things in our lives, good and bad, challenging, not challenging, to grow us as individuals and to become more like Him, more like Jesus. And we can't become more like Jesus without having challenges, disappointments in our lives. So they're important and they're not meant to destroy us. I think that's truth and the science behind it. The art is how we personally walk through that and handle it, and then how we help others walk through that and handle it, a little bit like we've been talking before. And I think a big piece of the art, or which something I continue to learn, is to separate emotions, my feelings on the situation, from truth. So in those situations when I'm working with someone who's disappointed and frustrated with me, I have to separate how I'm feeling. Because initially, I think we all come up with how we're going to respond right away to that. Well, that's not true. You're not seeing this. My side.
Yeah.
And we have to pull back from that and say, okay, where is this person coming from? What do they see? I understand I have more information or my perspective, but let's separate what I'm feeling right now, and how are we going to move forward from here? That's easier said than done.
100%.
Very, very, very easier said than done, but that is part of the art and learning and growing as a leader, is how do we separate how I'm feeling about this, my frustrations, maybe even how I'm getting a little angry because of the way this person is responding. How do I separate that? And also know that this isn't always about me. Yes, as a leader, I can grow. Yes, as a leader, I probably could have done X, Y, and Z better, and I will do that next time. But a lot of this could be on this person. I can't own that person's feelings. I can't own the way that person is responding right now. I can only do the best that I know how to do in this situation, that art of helping someone, and then they have to own it. So I have to pull myself apart from that's on them and not on me.
Yeah, no, I that's real. Everything you said was great there, but even that last piece of saying, okay, I can only take care of me. At the end of the day, they gotta take care of them, and and that's difficult. Like when we realize that, like, okay, like I've done the best I can, but sometimes even the best we've done, best like performance, and how am I going to disappoint others? Well, can fall short by way of the other person, and maybe some immaturities on their end, or maybe some insecurities or whatever. Like in that moment, like, what do you do with that? Like, if someone is like, you're disappointing someone and someone's just not taking it well, and you're like, again, as conscious as you can, you're like, I know I'm doing the best I can right now, and I'm approaching this maturely. I'm trying, and they're not responding well. What do you do with that?
It's a great question. It's kind of interesting because it's what I always think of as the disappointment triad, because somebody is disappointed with you.
Okay.
They're not responding well. Now I'm disappointed in them because they're not responding how I think they should as a leader. And now I'm also disappointed in myself because maybe I haven't led them well. Why are they not responding the way that I have thought I was leading them? So you've got this triangle of disappointment.
Yeah, that's good.
You have to pull yourself outside of all of that. Look at the situation, and again, look at, okay, how have I responded in this situation? Where can I grow? What do they need to own? And what do I need to own? And then what do I have to let go? That this is not about me. This is about the other person. Wow. So that's good. Can a lot happen in this triangle. And I would encourage anybody that is feeling this or feeling this pressure to step away from it. Maybe talk to somebody, a professional, a friend, a mentor, through it a little bit, so that you can kind of look at the perspective of there and pull the emotions outside of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet one more thing that's easier said than done, right?
Right.
To be able to pull, like, even we were talking about optimism, pessimism, I really think realism is a more appropriate lens to think through when we think about disappointing others and managing disappointment, to get yourself outside of the bubble and to see it from a top-down approach, for sure. Can you say again the triad?
The triad, yes.
Go ahead, say that again.
So there's 3 kind of points of this triad or this triangle. The person that's disappointed in you. Now you're disappointed potentially in their response. If they're responding poorly, they're attacking, they're being passive-aggressive, they're not able to respond well. Now you're disappointed in them. And then you may also then be disappointing yourself because you think, I should have been able to been a better leader to them. What did I miss that now they're responding this way? So you've got this, and that can happen in a relationship with your spouse. That can happen with your kids. I mean, think of child situation. Your child's disappointing you as a parent. You're disappointed in the way they're reacting. And then, I'm the parent. Why did I not teach my kid X, Y, and Z? So you've got all these things that go together.
So if you're not careful, you can get stuck in that triangle really quickly.
And I think a lot of times leaders, when I've sat with leaders that are ready to bounce, like, I got to get out of this, I can't do this anymore. A lot comes back to all of these things coming into play, and your head just gets mixed up, and you're thinking, I'm a failure. I failed. I need to leave. Someone else needs to come in and take my place here. And that's when you see, people moving from situations to situations, and that's where I get sad and discouraged, because we need each other as leaders. We need to encourage each other and help each other see these different perspectives and kind of separate ourselves from the disappointment.
Man, that's good. I'm gonna need to think on that one myself. Even that. Thanks for sharing that triangle. That's because again, it's easy to get stuck in it, and you just provided 3 very accurate angles behind how we can get stuck in it, and the necessity to pull ourselves out of that. So no, that's really, really good.
And I can throw one more thing in there. Just think one other thing, and then there can be the pressure that if you have a boss or someone you report to, that you're thinking, now they're going to look at me that I failed because I've disappointed all these areas.
Yeah.
So you throw that little pivot over there, and that's another layer.
That's a square now.
Yeah. Yes.
Straight up. Wow.
We won't go down that.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So you could turn it into what's it? A hexagon, a octagon. As I'm sure you could keep going. So let's get off that one.
Yeah. Let's move on.
What would an ideal team, family, organization look like that manages disappointment and disappointing others healthily? Being the key word.
Yes, I'll pull out kind of things that we've been sort of talking about. I think that if I'm looking at an organization that I said, man, that organization is really healthy, I'd be looking at three things. That would be communicating clearly, communicating expectations clearly, communicating, just meeting regularly and talking straight to each other. Communicating clearly. The second would be just active listening. People that are willing to listen curiously, hear each other's perspectives, kind of understand, okay, I get why you're coming from that angle. And then finally, that piece that I mentioned briefly about believing the best in each other. Yep. As teammates, as family members, I got to believe the best in my spouse, that they are making decisions or doing things because they want, our family to be healthy. Same with team members, same with our boss or our board or whoever we report to, believing the best in each other. So those 3 things, I think, it's not everything, but man, it makes a huge difference within organizations. If all team members are willing to do those 3 things, it's going to make a difference.
Beautiful. So I know that probably most of us don't struggle with this, but let's throw it out there just in case, right? How can we make sure we don't swing the pendulum to not caring whatsoever if we disappoint people? Again, most of us probably don't think that way, but in case there is people who do kind of have that bent within their personality, the way that they think, and and the challenges that it faces. How can we make sure that we don't swing that pendulum?
There's kind of 2 types of situations that come to mind when that pendulum gets swung. One is it's a personality thing, that there's sometimes personalities are more like the bull in the room with the china in it, running kind of around and just trying to get the mission done, not really being aware of the people that might be left in the wake of the situation. There's that. And then there's the individual that is just burnout. If somebody is in true burnout, they have just I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter what you're feeling. I'm not taking the time to hear you. You are ridiculous. I'm done with you. So if you've gotten to the place of burnout, then there's definitely some work that needs to be done, some healing, some self-care, some real time away from those situations and those people. So I guess it comes back to your motivations, where you're at, looking at your situation and where you're at emotionally and spiritually. To avoid getting to that point, getting to the point where it doesn't matter anymore. And then if your personality is more that bull in the china closet, then I would suggest you've got to have more tools in your toolkit, and you have to work a lot harder to make sure that you're willing to listen to people and understand their perspectives, because you will leave a lot of hurt people behind you if you're not careful.
And we've kind of addressed personality a little bit prior even, but I think a very important thing that you mentioned there that needs to be that needs to be said and reiterated even is the idea of like that self-care. That if we don't practice that well enough, it does lead to burnout. And when we are not practicing good self-care, it doesn't matter how strong we are, how mature we think we are, like everything inside of us just becomes unhealthy over time. And that can definitely, I can see how that would definitely be swinging the pendulum to, yep, don't give a rip at all in the slice of how I'm disappointing people. And so, no, I think that's, thanks for speaking into that burnout part. And so, we've kind of addressed a little bit of this, but what would you say is like, what is the role and confidence and how to keep yourself healthily rooted when other people like don't respond well? So I know we talked about a little bit about that triad, now square, but is there kind of anything else that you would speak into that around like when someone isn't really good at receiving the disappointment, what's like the role of you staying confident specifically in your job, whether it's being a mom, a wife, a boss, an employee? Like, what's the role of confidence in keeping yourself healthily rooted?
That's a really, really great question, and kind of goes back to some of the things that we were saying about being able to step away from the situation and reflect on the decisions that you're making or the decisions that you're going to make and evaluate them and evaluate where you're at. I think boundaries is a really big word that comes to play in this situation. Knowing where your boundaries are, being able to separate that the way people are responding is probably more on them than it is on you, especially after you've done that reflective piece on yourself. So I think that that's the confidence piece. If you feel like I've looked at this, I've done everything that I can, I believe that I'm making the best decision in this situation. Now I have to put up my boundary of it's okay. It's okay how they respond. It's okay what they're saying at me. I've done everything that I can, and that's a boundary, and it's important. There's been times when I look back and I have made decisions because a person is so worked up and so upset and they need this right now, and in that moment I've said, okay, we're going to do this, knowing in my gut that's not what we should do. So at that moment I'm not disappointing them, but 3 months down the line, it's going to be a much, much bigger disappointment.
Yeah.
So as a leader, we have to be able to step back and see the big picture and say, this might help this person right now, but in the end, they're going to be more frustrated and discouraged and maybe even quit because I said yes now when I should not have.
Yep.
So being able to step back, look at the big picture, and then say, okay, I know this is the right decision. This is where we need to go. I feel at peace with this. And their response is not about me.
Yeah. No, I think, and as you throw out the word boundaries, like that's another crucial conversation that each leader has to have with themselves of what appropriate and healthy boundaries. That could be a whole other podcast episode, right? Of what's appropriate boundaries within the family life, the workspace, friend life, et cetera. And so, but I think that in order to help keep yourself rooted, boundaries are needed. Yeah. So that's really good. And so, we've been talking a lot about this now. Let's get practical. Mm-hmm. What are practical ways leaders and influencers can better manage disappointment and disappointing others?
Mm-hmm. The practical ways, one is practice. So we have to practice it. You're going to have to disappoint people, which will happen. You have to evaluate how it went. You've got to practice it. Second, I would say a practical tip is accountability in the sense of having somebody in your life, whether it's a counselor or a mentor or someone that you're able to talk through these things with. If you're naturally a people pleaser, you have to have someone holding you accountable to make sure that you're making decisions that are best for all and not just making sure somebody is happy with you. You have to have somebody that you can say, I'm responding this way. What is going on? I'm angry. I'm just angry at this person. What's going on, behind here? So I would say practice accountability and then going back to those things that we shared with Make a Good Team. How are you doing with listening? How are you doing with clearly communicating to the people in your teams or your spouse or your family or whatever the situation would be? And how are you doing with believing the best in the people on your teams?
No, those are great. Those are really great practical pieces, and I can validate like those are really good, and knowing that those those parts will inevitably make our leadership better, but they take a lot of work, like a lot of investment and time to put into, and trial and error. As you said at the very beginning, go practice. So immediately my brain was like, oh, so I'm gonna go find someone to go disappoint, which I'm like, nope, don't do that. But like, but you're right in saying there is there's growth in practice. Just being willing to give it a shot.
And ask people, I would suggest if you're not sure where you're at with some of this stuff, ask your spouse if you're married, ask a friend, ask that mentor, ask the person that reports to you. How do I respond in this situation? How do I handle disappointment? Ask them. And then also ask them, what can I do better in those areas of communicating, listening, and believing the best?
Ooh.
Where can I grow so that I can support you better so that we aren't always having these critical conversations with each other? That would be a great suggestion if you're not sure.
Yeah, and going back to one of those first like crucial words you said at the very beginning, that's vulnerability.
Yeah. That's
vulnerability right there. Of like going to a boss, going to your spouse and saying, hey, basically you're asking, where do I suck?
Yeah.
Like where am I not doing great in, and how can I be better? But man, those turn, in my opinion, they turn into some of the most beautiful conversations, if handled well on both parties, to provide greater depth, greater cohesiveness in relationship, and just no, that's really good. Hard, but good. As we kind of lay in the plane of this conversation, Meredith, do you have any resources, books, articles, videos of the sort that if someone wanted to dive deeper into this, they would they could go there?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've talked about is being a healthy leader. So I would encourage, if you've never read anything by Peter Scazzero, to get some of his resources, the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality book, or the one for the leader or the church, digging into those resources, because it's all about where we're at as a leader. If we're emotionally healthy with our spiritual life, our emotional journey, we're going to be able to respond better to disappointment. We're going to be able to lead people better. We're going to be able to reflect on our lives a little bit better as leaders realistically, and not erring on super positive or super negative on ourselves. So that would be my encouragement for anybody that's listening. Something I've read that book in different seasons, and it hits me at different points and ways, and God shows me where I need to grow and keep growing, and how I can address those weaknesses in those areas.
Definitely encourage reading books from Peter Scazzero as well, I've read Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and that book wrecked me when I read it back in college, and so I probably need to go read it again, if I'm being honest. And so, but the Emotionally Healthy Leader, the Emotional Healthy Church is all really good books as well. And so, do you have any final words, final thoughts, piece of advice to share with the viewers and listeners as we finish up this conversation?
I guess what's on my mind is, if you are discouraged right now, wherever you're at in your leadership or whatever's going on in your life, just a reminder that you are enough, and that God has given you the tools and the resources and put you in a place of leadership for a reason and a purpose. And so if you're really being hard on yourselves right now, get together with someone that can encourage you. Look back at some of the great things that you've seen God do. Look back at some of those moments that have encouraged your heart. Just spend some time reflecting if you're in that season. And if you're in a season that you're just afraid to disappoint people, I just encourage you to sit with that idea that you will disappoint somebody. You will disappoint somebody today, and think through and pray through what's going to be my response in those for moving forward.
It's just fascinating because this whole conversation can technically be depressing. And even as you were saying that, hey, just a reminder, you're going to disappoint someone today. That's your feel-good message of the day. But it's so vital. We firmly believe this, that you will be a healthier, stronger, more competent leader if you learn the art and the science of managing disappointment and disappointing others. And so I just couldn't agree more with what you said there. And so, Meredith, thank you This has been so rich, sweet, challenging, and for me, for sure. And so, just thank you so much for your willingness to process this heavy and needed conversation, and even in your workspace of working at CrossNet for 14 years, that you probably having the opportunity to model this, the things you're talking about, and within your home, you have a chance to model this, and just even being able to process with you right now. Like, I can tell, like, you're a person who genuinely believes the things you're saying, and that even if it's in imperfection or brokenness, that you're modeling this pretty well in your workspace in your home. So just thank you for being someone who tries to model this and practice what you say and preach as well. So just thank you. And thanks for being a guest with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been encouraging to talk about, and I hope it's encouraging to the listeners as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you are enjoying what you've been listening to, you're liking what you're hearing, man, would you give us a rating or hit the share button wherever you consume the content? And we hope that you will join us next time as we continue to explore the art and the science of building influential capacity. Catch you next time.